When I was 25, I begged Brent Winder not to kill my puppy. If you don't want me to kill it, you need to kneel and apologize to Larsen on its behalf. I knelt, Larsen smiled, and so did he, with indulgence. When I was 26, I begged him to save my critically ill father. He threw a check in my face. Sure, as long as you die. But if you do, die far away, don't dirty my house. I took the check to the hospital and curled up in front of my mother's grave, cutting my wrist. When I was 27, I married a man whose eyes were full of me, but he came to my wedding with red eyes. Ding! This novel reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. Sabrina Smith, hand over your dog. It scared Larsen. I held my trembling puppy tightly, looking at Brent Winder in front of me, and Larsen Baker, who was crying pitifully in his arms. There was a dirty paw print on the hem of her white dress, which Molly had made when she got scared by Larsen earlier. Brent, let it go. Why fuss over an animal? Larsen said this but glanced fearfully at Molly, burrowing further into Brent's embrace. Seeing her trembling with fear, Brent's anger flared even more. He called someone over, ready to snatch Molly from my arms. Molly whimpered in fear, and I knew I couldn't protect her. Brent, please, don't kill her. I'll do anything you want, just don't kill her. I won't kill her if you kneel and apologize to Larsen on her behalf. Brent. Larsen weakly tugged at his sleeve. This isn't right, after all, she's still your wife. When she mentioned wife, her eyes darkened. What kind of wife is she? Brent stared coldly at me. Sabrina, will you kneel or not? I held Molly, who was trembling in my arms. I knelt, Larsen smiled, and Brent looked at her indulgently and smiled as well. Late at night, I received a message from Larsen. In the photo, her dark green silk slip dress and Brent's white shirt were tangled messily on the floor. On the white sheets, her slender arm hung off the bed, with Brent's tie still bound around her wrist. That tie was a Valentine's Day gift I had personally picked out for him. 3 years apart, Brent is still so strong. Sabrina, haven't you been able to satisfy him all these years? 3 times in one night, Brent was almost exhausted. Sabrina, you really are a failure as a wife. Oh, and by the way, I really hate your dog. I'll make sure Brent kills it. I hate the dog, and I hate its owner even more. Your family is going bankrupt. What do you have that's better than me? You cling on shamelessly. I closed my phone expressionlessly. A continuous stabbing pain hit my left chest. This had been happening countless times since Larsen returned half a year ago. I pressed the painful spot, and when I couldn't bear it anymore, I got up and took 2 painkillers. Maybe the medicine took effect, and the pain subsided. I fell asleep groggily. I was awakened by a shrill scream. When I rushed downstairs, I saw Molly covered in blood from being beaten by the servants, limping and wailing as she ran out the door. I hurriedly called out Molly's name, chasing after her outside, but her figure had disappeared. I searched for most of the night but couldn't find her anywhere. When Brent came back, I was sitting alone outside the front gate, staring blankly. Molly had been with me since she was born. She had never left my side, and now I didn't know where she had run off to or how she would survive in the future. In my heart, I prayed that she had run away and at least could live on. If she stayed in this house, who knows when she might be beaten to death one day. In the future, I'll have someone send you a more obedient dog as compensation. I shook my head. No need. Larsen has been frightened and has nightmares every night. Sabrina, as long as your dog is here, she can't be at peace. I couldn't help but laugh, tears falling down. Brent, am I still considered your wife? I never intended to marry you, Sabrina. If it weren't for the slight resemblance you have to Larsen, if it weren't for the sentiment of growing up together. Do you think I would still let you be Mrs. Winder? After marrying him, my family's company encountered a financial crisis and was on the brink of bankruptcy. My father was so worried that his hair turned white overnight. My in-laws' attitude towards me plummeted, and they had long wanted Brent and me to divorce. But Brent had never mentioned divorce, so I thought there was still some affection between us as husband and wife. But now it seems, it was just my wishful thinking. I slowly stood up, enduring the severe pain in my chest, and whispered, Brent, let's get a divorce. Divorce? Brent seemed to hear a joke. Your father asked me to guarantee a loan of $30 million from the bank, Sabrina. Do you think he will let you divorce? Or, do you have the ability to repay that $30 million? Brent sneered. Besides, with your abilities, you wouldn't be able to earn $30 million in your lifetime. This $30 million was my father's last gamble. But in the end, it still couldn't save the situation. He fell ill, with liver and kidney failure. But with the huge debt burden on the Smith family and the company, there was no money left for his treatment or a kidney transplant. When the company was in trouble before, I had already taken out all my jewelry and dowry. I had no other way. My mother died early, and my father raised me alone all these years. His heart was divided into two halves, one for the company he and my mother founded, and one for me. Now, I couldn't do anything. I could only go to Brent. To Larsen's house, to find my husband, Brent. Brent was taking a shower, and Larsen stood at the door in a bathrobe, looking at me. Need money again? Sabrina, let me tell you, with the Smith family's bottomless pit, you'd better leave Brent alone. The left side of my chest started to hurt faintly again. I remembered what the doctor said when I fainted in pain at the hospital. Sabrina, you need to have surgery immediately to remove the lesion on the left side to save your life. I suggest you stay in the hospital now. Does your husband know? Dr. Swain, can you keep this a secret for me? I don't want my father to know I'm sick. Okay, but you must have the surgery soon, Sabrina. I will personally perform the operation. Dr. Swain, but I don't want to have the surgery. Sabrina! This is not the time to be willful. Dr. Swain, thank you, but if I really can't live, I want to leave intact. Sabrina. I raised my hand, pressing my painfully aching left chest, my face pale. I'll wait for Brent to come out. Larsen was about to say something when she suddenly heard the sound of the bathroom door opening behind her. Her expression changed instantly, and she ran to Brent's side, crying pitifully. Brent. Sabrina wants me to give one of my kidneys to her father to save his life, but isn't my life a life too? I didn't have time to say anything before a heavy slap landed on my face. I was stunned by the slap. Blood flowed from my mouth and nose, but I forgot to raise my hand to wipe it away. I just stared blankly at Brent in front of me. We grew up together and were childhood sweethearts. He and Larsen were college sweethearts. Because Larsen's family background was poor, the Winder family refused to accept her as a daughter-in-law. At that time, my family and the Winder family were well matched in terms of social standing, and I liked Brent. So, the marriage was arranged between our families. But Brent harbored deep resentment towards me because of this. He thought I had schemed to take advantage of the situation, cutting off his relationship with Larsen. He believed I was full of deceit, smugly sending ambiguous photos to Larsen before the wedding, causing her to have a breakdown and commit suicide abroad. If Larsen dead, I could eliminate any future threats. Today, he believed such a blatant lie and slapped me directly. I looked at him and dazedly thought, where had the Brent who carried me home when I fell and bought me candies to comfort me gone? Where had the young Brent who got beaten up by thugs to protect me gone? Brent, for the sake of our marriage and for my father's kindness to you, can you save him? Brent looked at me and suddenly laughed. He lit a cigarette and took out a check. Sure, as long as you die, I'll save him. Okay, I'll die. I raised my hand, pressing on my left chest that was so painful it had gone numb. Brent, don't worry, as long as it can save my father, I'll die immediately. Don't, Sabrina, if you're going to die, do it far away. Don't die in my and Larsen's house. Yes, Brent, it's really scary. If she dies at our doorstep, it would be so unlucky. Did you hear what Larsen said? Brent threw the check at my face. Get lost, don't embarrass yourself anymore. I squatted down and picked up the check. I took one last look at Brent, my husband, the person I had secretly admired since childhood. I said a final goodbye to him in my heart. When he made me kneel for Larsen and later killed my Molly, I had completely let go of him. The dream of youth should also wake up. I took the check and went straight to the hospital. I didn't know that after I left, Brent also left Larsen's apartment with a displeased expression. Larsen's eyes were red as she watched him for a long time, but he didn't compromise. My father was very sick and weak. I told him that he could be saved. Brent had given me a lot of money. But my father shook his head at me. Sabrina, we don't want his money. I lay by his bedside, crying silently. Sabrina, listen to me, leave Brent, don't look back, don't reconcile. I looked at my loving father through tear-filled eyes. Dad. This was the last thing he said to me. After saying this, he held my hand and fell into a coma. I cried out for the doctors and nurses to come. I took out the check, begging them to save my father. But it was already too late. He had no will to live, he didn't want to live anymore. He missed my mother. I missed my mother too. A child without a mother can't cry loudly even when wronged. A child without a mother is like wild grass, trampled by anyone. At 2 in the morning, I sat in front of my mother's tombstone for a long time. Finally, I curled up against my mother's photo and used a sharp blade to cut the veins in the wrist. My consciousness began to blur, and the blood loss made me shiver with cold. I tried to curl up and hold myself tight. Mom was coming to take me and Dad. Our family could be reunited in another world. Sabrina. Sabrina. In a daze, I heard someone calling my name. I tried to open my eyes wide but could only vaguely see a tall, slender figure running towards me. I fell into a warm but unfamiliar embrace. I wanted to see clearly who it was, but I had lost all my strength. The arm stained with blood hung limply from his embrace, and I heard the man calling my name heart-wrenchingly. Sabrina, Sabrina. So, someone did care about me after all. I was in a coma for a week in the hospital. When I woke up, my father had already been buried. He was buried in my mother's grave, and now they can be together forever. No one knows that I have also reserved a small spot for myself in front of my mother's grave. Having lost my loved ones, there wasn't much left in this world for me to hold on to. But I survived. It was Victor White who saved me. Sabrina, I'm sorry I came back late. Victor held my hand, his eyes were bloodshot. He had been by my side for the entire week, looking haggard with stubble all over his face. Victor, why are you here? I weakly asked, trying hard to smile at him, but I didn't even have the strength to smile. Don't talk, Sabrina. Rest well. Tell me whatever you want to eat, and I'll get it for you. I want to see Brent Winder. Sabrina. Victor's eyes were filled with uncontrollable anger and helplessness. But I was very persistent. Please, Victor. Victor stood up and looked at me for a long time. His eyes were dark, but in the end, he didn't refuse me. I fell asleep again for a few hours, and Brent finally arrived. He came with Larsen. But he didn't let Larsen enter the ward. Victor said you wanted to see me? Brent stood by my bed, his voice surprisingly gentle. I lay there, calmly looking at him. It was probably at the moment when my blood was about to run dry. My obsession and love for him disappeared along with the blood. But at this moment, I felt an unprecedented sense of relief and freedom. It was as if I had personally cut the ropes that bound me. Brent Winder, let's get a divorce. He was a bit surprised but then nodded in relief. It's best if you've come to this realization. We shouldn't have gotten married in the first place. I smiled too, then let's do it tomorrow. We'll go through the divorce procedures. He showed some mercy, you're seriously injured, just rest. I'll take care of the divorce procedures. Okay, thank you. Sabrina Smith, if you want anything, you can tell me. After all, we were married. There's nothing I want. I'll just take back what I brought into the marriage. Because those were the dowry my parents prepared for me, so I didn't want those things to stay with the Winder family. All right, I'll give you an additional $5 million. No need, my father left me a house and an inheritance. All right, as you wish. Brent suddenly seemed a bit irritated. He looked at me several more times. Sabrina, you can't completely blame me for your father's situation. He didn't want to undergo surgery himself. I knew that, my father had told me. Yes. I didn't want things to turn out this way either. If you hadn't schemed against Larsen and gone to great lengths to marry me, I wouldn't have disliked you so much. I'm sorry. I won't bother you anymore in the future. Take good care of yourself. I'll come to see you another day. Brent turned and left the ward. I slowly closed my eyes. It felt so good, like I had escaped from an airtight cocoon. That suffocating pain, I would never feel it again. Victor reviewed all my medical records and examination reports. He insisted on taking me to be city for treatment, not allowing me to object. I thought about it for a long time and made only one request. Could you not tell anyone about my illness? After all, if I really need surgery in the future, I don't want people to know I'm an incomplete woman. Victor trembled as he gently held me. Okay, I won't tell anyone. No one will know. After getting the divorce certificate, Victor took me to be city. On the day we left, I heard that Brent was getting engaged to Larsen. The Winder family didn't like me as their daughter-in-law, but they disliked Larsen, who came from a very poor background, even more and had been strongly opposing the engagement. I had no interest in their affairs. After boarding the plane, I turned off my phone and broke the SIM card. I would no longer use my old phone number, everything here was completely left behind by me. After arriving in B City, I soon began inpatient treatment. Perhaps because my mood was no longer as depressed and heavy as before, my condition gradually stabilized. Victor stayed by my side all the time. He was very busy, with everything in his newly established company needing his attention. But he spent at least 3 days a week in the hospital with me. I was no longer the naive and carefree child I once was. I could feel that Victor's feelings for me were unusual. The little things I used to overlook now surfaced one by one. The night before I married Brent, why did Victor get so drunk? After I married Brent, Victor went abroad and rarely returned in the past 3 years. He didn't even come home for the new year. When I visited Mr. and Mrs. White, the elderly couple sighed deeply, holding my hand, wanting to speak but stopping short. The night my father was seriously ill and I had an accident, why did Victor appear so timely? When I was a child, I liked to cling to Brent because we were the same age and he loved to play around. But Victor always seemed mature and steady, like a model child from another family. My parents often used him to scold me, so I didn't like him much and gradually distanced myself from him. Later, as I grew up, I naturally fell in love with Brent. But Brent only liked the delicate and fragile Larsen. I secretly cried countless times back then. Once, I was crying and writing Brent's name on the ground when Victor caught me. I was terrified, his face was particularly cold and unpleasant. I was afraid he would tell my parents and kept begging him while holding his hand. Of course, he didn't tell my parents. Instead, in an unusual move, he bought me an ice cream to comfort me. He stayed with me while I ate the ice cream, listening to me ramble on about how much I liked Brent. That night, he didn't say much. When he finally took me home, he just coldly reminded me, "Your college entrance exam is the most important thing right now. Don't waste your time on things you shouldn't." I nodded quickly, but didn't take it to heart. How could someone as dull as Victor understand what it's like to like someone? It was only now, much later, that I realized. It wasn't that Victor didn't understand, the one who truly didn't understand was me. In the second month of my stay in B City, I suddenly received a call from an old friend. To be precise, it was a mutual friend of Brent and mine. "Sabrina, where are you now?" "I'm out of town. Is something wrong?" "It's just, well, could you come back to see Brent, or at least give him a call?" In just 2 short months, hearing Brent's name again didn't stir any feelings in me. "Sorry, Dave, Brent and I are divorced." "I know, it's just, Sabrina. Brent is not doing well right now. Last night he got drunk at our gathering and kept calling your name." I didn't say anything else and hung up the phone. Then I blocked the number. They were Brent's friends first, and only then were they my friends. No matter what Brent did, they would always stand by his side first. But they never thought about it. Whether Brent was doing well or not, how he was now, what did it have to do with me, his ex-wife? In the afternoon, another call came from an unknown number. I didn't answer it. A moment later, I received a text message. "Sabrina, it's me, Brent. Can you pick up the phone?" I didn't reply and blocked that number too. Brent was a very arrogant and conceited person. All these years, I had been chasing after him, revolving around him. I once loved him so much that I lost myself. But I will never do that again. Once a person breaks free from the cage that confines them, they will find the world vast and open. The so-called love that once made you feel like dying is actually insignificant. Besides, that so-called love might have been nothing more than an obsession from our youthful days. Given Brent's personality, he should understand my attitude and won't come looking for me again. But I didn't expect that 3 days later, Brent suddenly appeared downstairs at the apartment Victor rented for me. When I came back from a walk in the garden, I saw him standing there, full of desolation. Sabrina. The moment Brent saw me, his eyes lit up. I didn't approach him, but I didn't turn around and leave either. My body was still a bit weak, and I didn't have the strength to put up a fight. Brent quickly walked up to me and reached out to hug me. I dodged. Brent was stunned for a moment. Sabrina, I've been looking for you for so long. There was a hint of grievance in his eyes. I remembered how he used to change girlfriends, how he was willing to die for Larsen. I was so angry and heartbroken that I refused to pay attention to him. He had the same expression then, looking at me. I would always soften and forgive him for everything, continuing to revolve around him. But now, though he was still the same person, why did my heart no longer feel a single ripple? Is something wrong? Sabrina, I've been thinking about you ever since you left. Brent had lost weight and looked very haggard. Dave said he wasn't doing well, and it didn't seem like a lie. I didn't say anything, and I didn't feel any emotion. I couldn't help but wonder why I had foolishly fallen for someone so fickle when I was younger. Brent could never let go of any woman who left him. First, it was Larsen Baker. Now it's Sabrina Smith. It's probably the same, only because she left, she became a cherished memory. Brent, is something wrong? If not, I'd like to go upstairs. Sabrina. Brent tried to grab me, but I dodged him again. Sabrina, Larsen and I are not engaged. Seeing that I still didn't speak, Brent became anxious. I agreed to the divorce on impulse. Sabrina, come back with me. I'll treat you well. You don't have any family left. We grew up together. From now on, I'll be your only family. He spoke urgently, sounding somewhat sincere. But I found it utterly boring. Brent, I'm not going back with you. When I decided to divorce you, I completely let you go. I don't love you anymore. Leave, and don't come back. Sabrina, you've changed. You weren't like this before. You said you would always be with me and love me forever. Yes, I said that, but I went back on my word. I didn't want to talk to him any longer, so I walked around him to go upstairs. Sabrina. Brent reached out and grabbed me. I was already seriously ill, and with his pull, I felt dizzy and collapsed to the ground. What's wrong, Sabrina? Brent seemed scared, his face turning pale. Nothing, just a bit tired these past few days. I pushed him away and tried to stand up, but I had no strength. I'll help you up. Brent bent over to pick me up, but was suddenly pushed away forcefully. Victor White? Brent staggered and steadied himself, looking at him unhappily. What are you doing here? Victor ignored him and directly picked me up. Sabrina, let's go home. Victor! Put Sabrina down. Sabrina doesn't want to see you, get lost. Who do you think you are? Sabrina is my wife. She wouldn't not want to see me. If I remember correctly, you were the one who handled the divorce proceedings. Victor looked at him coldly. Brent, don't forget, you were the one who gave up on Sabrina. You. Please don't bother her again. If you show up here again, I'll call the police immediately. Victor, you like Sabrina. You've always liked her, so now that we're just divorced, you're taking advantage of the situation, aren't you? Yes, I admit I like Sabrina, but I wouldn't take advantage of the situation. Brent, don't think all men in this world are as despicable as you. Victor, let Sabrina choose for herself. Let her decide if she wants to go with me. Brent refused to give up. Sabrina, come back with me. We are still husband and wife. Let's live a good life together. We can get a dog and still call it Molly. Brent's eyes were red as he looked at me urgently. Sabrina, you've always wanted a child. We'll start trying as soon as we get back. Boy or girl, it doesn't matter. As long as you like it, I will too, okay? I won't meet with Larsen anymore, okay? Victor held me, his expression as calm and composed as always. Sabrina, you choose, I will respect all your decisions. It seemed like it had always been this way since we were young, his emotions never showed. But I remember that night when he found me at my mom's grave. How heart-wrenching his voice was when he called my name. How scorching his tears felt when they fell on my face. At this moment, my heart suddenly twitched lightly. A faint pain started to spread from the bottom of my heart. It spread to my limbs and veins, that kind of bitter pain, uncontrollable pain, made my eyes instantly red. Victor, perhaps, didn't even notice it himself. His tone was so calm, but the way he held me was so tight. He was even slightly trembling. He was afraid that Brent would just crook his finger and I would run back to his side. Afraid that Sabrina would still be as foolish and naive as before, blinded. I gently held Victor's long fingers. Victor. Yes, Sabrina. I'm a bit hungry, can you cook for me? Victor looked at me, and a few seconds later, he suddenly smiled at me gently. Shall we go home then? Let's go home. As he carried me into the elevator, Brent seemed unwilling to believe my choice. But he was ultimately too proud and didn't follow. Victor let me rest on the sofa, took off his suit jacket, and put on an apron before heading to the kitchen. While making soup, he prepared a glass of honey water and brought it out to me. I held the cup and watched his busy back. 3 meals a day, the ordinary aspects of life, this seemed like true happiness. If only I weren't sick. How wonderful that would be. Sabrina, time to eat. Victor helped me to the dining table to sit down. It was all my favorite dishes, and even dessert, a small ice cream. Can I eat this? There are many things I avoid eating now, and I haven't had ice cream in a long time. It was your favorite when you were a kid, a little bit won't hurt. Victor, you work so hard, it must be tiring. Victor just patted my hair. Sabrina, I've never been this happy. If only I weren't sick. You will get better, no matter what, I will cure you. What if, one day, I truly become incomplete? As long as you are Sabrina, that's enough. Victor served me a bowl of soup. Eat well, Sabrina, I'm here. But Victor is not a god. People eat grains and cereals, and they will inevitably get sick. These past years have been really unhappy for me, too repressive. That's why I got this illness. Although the condition was temporarily stable before, it soon flared up again. That night, I fainted while taking a shower. Victor didn't even bother to change his shoes, carrying me and rushing to the hospital. I was sent into the emergency room. He just sat on the long bench in the hallway outside, staring motionlessly at the tightly closed door. Later, the doctor said, chemotherapy was needed, and if necessary, one side of the lesion must be removed to prevent the spread of cancer cells. I needed to shave my head and start the excruciating process that every cancer patient has to go through. Victor sat by my bed, his eyes filled with such tenderness. My Sabrina will still be the most beautiful girl even with a shaved head. I will stay with Sabrina, okay? He took off his hat, and I saw his shaved head. Those repressed feelings and uncontrollable guilt and regret suddenly surged like a tide. I hugged him and gradually started to cry, eventually breaking down and sobbing like a child in his arms. Victor. I clutched his sleeve tightly and called out hoarsely, Victor. Sabrina, be good, let's accept the treatment properly, okay? Can we wait a little longer? I looked up with my tear-streaked face in his arms. Before my chemotherapy, Victor, can I be your bride? When I married Brent, we just got the certificate. No engagement ceremony, no wedding. On the wedding night, there was no bridal chamber. Because Brent flew abroad overnight to comfort Larsen, who was making a scene and threatening to take her own life. Probably no one in this world would believe it. Even Dave and the others wouldn't know. For 3 years of marriage to Brent, we never had a real husband-wife relationship. How ridiculous. He wouldn't give me a wedding, nor would he touch me. But for those 3 years, I was like a deaf and blind person, deceiving myself. Every girl has such a silly and wholeheartedly invested period. But some people are lucky to wake up, while others deceive themselves for a lifetime. I died once, as if reborn. Some worldly concerns, I don't want to consider anymore. Some regrets and missed opportunities, I don't want to experience again. But I didn't get a certificate with Victor. If one day I leave this world, Victor still has to live well. He will meet a better girl and will get married and have children. I'm a bit selfish, but I can't be completely selfish. Our wedding wasn't grand. The day before the wedding, Victor gave me a big surprise. He found Molly and brought her back to me. I was so happy I almost went crazy, hugging Molly and not wanting to let go. Molly lay in my arms, whimpering constantly. She still recognized me. She was also thinking of me. At that moment, I really felt like the happiest person in the world. Because I no longer had my parents, and most of my former friends were connected to Brent. In the end, for my wedding with Victor, I only invited my best friend Anna. We were high school classmates. Later, I followed Brent back to my hometown. She also followed the boy she loved to the south. I didn't have a wedding when I married Brent, and she couldn't be my bridesmaid. But this time, she could wear a beautiful bridesmaid dress and accompany me to get married. Sabrina, why didn't you tell me about your illness, about the divorce? Anna hugged me and cried for a long, long time. Aren't I your best friend? Didn't we say we would never have secrets? You're doing so well now, I didn't want to worry you. Anna froze for a moment, and the next instant, her tears fell even more fiercely. Sabrina, I'm not doing well at all, not happy. What's wrong, Anna? Haven't you and James always been doing well? Anna shook her head. Don't talk about my troubles, tell me about you, Sabrina. It was pretty bad before, but now, I'm very happy. I looked at Victor. The stylist was tidying his hair. He saw me looking at him through the mirror, and a doting smile gradually spread across his eyes. I also smiled. Anna, look, I prepared the most beautiful bridesmaid dress for you. Anna, with red eyes, stroked the exquisite bridesmaid dress. It's really beautiful. You fool, why did you make the bridesmaid look so good? I leaned in her arms, acting spoiled like I did when we were in school. Because Anna and I are best friends, I just want my best friend to look beautiful. You are the bride, today you are the most beautiful, no woman in the world can compare to you. Anna pinched my face. Quickly touch up your makeup, the wedding is about to start. I obediently went to touch up my makeup, and everything was ready. Changing into high heels, Anna helped me stand up. I smiled at Victor. Victor, do I look good? Right now, I still had thick black hair. I was wearing a white bridal dress with slightly heavy bridal makeup. I looked healthy and beautiful. Victor looked at me seriously, carefully examining his bride. You look very beautiful. Your hairstyle and makeup suit you perfectly. And you look very handsome. I raised my hand and gently smoothed his recently trimmed sideburns. Victor, you are the most handsome groom in the world. He chuckled and gently hugged me, careful not to mess up my makeup. He gave me a light peck. Sabrina, in my heart, you are the most beautiful girl in the world. He held my hand and walked out. None of us expected Brent to appear in the hall downstairs. He was even wearing a formal black suit, holding a bouquet of roses. The White family's relatives were somewhat surprised. Mr. and Mrs. White's faces also looked a bit unpleasant. But Brent pretended not to see. He held the bouquet and walked straight to Victor and me. Victor's face gradually turned cold and stern. Brent, today is a good day for Sabrina and me. I don't want any trouble, please leave on your own. Brent ignored him, his eyes burning as he looked at me. He had lost a lot of weight, and his hair was cut shorter. I noticed the white shirt he was wearing under his suit, it looked familiar. The tie clip on his tie was also very familiar. On his ring finger, he was still wearing the wedding ring we bought casually back then. Sabrina. Brent knelt down on one knee, holding the bouquet. I came to marry you, Sabrina. I wanted to laugh but couldn't. This was once a dream I had in my youth. But unfortunately, I no longer wanted or would have such a dream. Some people are truly not worth it. Honey, is our wedding about to start? I softly asked Victor. The illness had drained my strength, and I insisted on wearing high heels. So at this moment, I was really uncomfortable. I wanted to hold the wedding quickly, to have a little more time to be a beautiful bride. I didn't want to waste time on these irrelevant people. 10 more minutes. Let's hurry over. Okay. Victor considerately supported me, walk slowly, no rush. Sabrina. Brent still stubbornly knelt there. Dave and a few others also came over, looking at Victor and me with some embarrassment. Then they went to Brent Winder's side, trying to pull him up. But he stubbornly knelt, unwilling to get up. Sabrina. I didn't look back. My wedding dress had a beautiful long train. Anna said I looked like a beloved little princess in the wedding dress. When I married Brent back then, there was no wedding or ceremony. I secretly cried alone for a long time. During those times, I couldn't bear to see others get married or see brides in wedding dresses. My heart felt like it was being cut by a knife, the pain was unbearable. But now, I could also be cherished. Brent, get up, Sabrina is getting married, you should let go. Dave gently persuaded. But Brent still wouldn't get up. His eyes were red, staring blankly at the back of me in my wedding dress. In the end, he broke down in tears. Sabrina is my wife, Dave, have you all forgotten? Sabrina is my wife, we have been married for 3 years. But Brent, you have been divorced for a year. You agreed to the divorce, you broke Sabrina's heart. I really didn't know I misunderstood Sabrina, I was deceived, Dave, I didn't mean to hurt Sabrina. We grew up together, I know she always liked me, I thought she would always like me, I thought no matter what I did, she wouldn't leave me. Brent stood up in a daze, trying to chase after us. I want to get my Sabrina back, I regret it, Dave, I regret it, I don't want anything else, I just want Sabrina. Dave and a few friends blocked him. Brent, do you want to hear the truth? We knew you before we knew Sabrina, we should have stood by your side, but Brent, I've really endured enough. All these years, did you treat Sabrina as a person, as your wife? What kind of person is Sabrina? We outsiders can see clearly, why couldn't you trust her? Brent, people have feelings, Sabrina was so pitiful by your side for those 3 years. We all want her to be a little happier, you see, she's getting married. Victor loves her very much, he cherishes her, she will be very happy in the future, can you please stop bothering her? Dave. Sabrina is just trying to make me angry, she's too sad, so she's deliberately marrying to make me angry. She doesn't like Victor White, the one she likes is me. Brent tightly grabbed Dave's sleeve, as if anxious to prove something. You all know, Dave, how much Sabrina has loved me all these years, you all have seen it, right? Yes, we've all seen it, that's why we're so heartbroken. Brent seemed not to hear, talking to himself. That's right, it must be, Sabrina is just too sad, the one she loves is me, it can only be me. Dave shook his head, Brent, you must be crazy. My wedding with Victor was very short. He felt sorry for me, afraid I wouldn't hold up, so the ceremony was as brief as possible. Even so, by the end, I was in too much pain to stand. Victor carried me back to the room. Honey, let me take some painkillers. Victor's eyes were wet, he held me for a long time before softly responding. Only 1 pill, Sabrina, be good. In the evening, I felt much better. Victor didn't go to have dinner with the relatives and friends, he stayed in the room with me. Honey, I want to take a bath. Okay, I'll carry you. Victor carried me to the bathroom. After the bath, he placed me on the bed. Sabrina, you rest for a while, I'll get you something to eat. Honey. I gently held his hand. Don't go, I don't want to eat, I want you to stay with me for a while. Okay. Come up here and hold me. Okay. Victor agreed to everything I said, treating me like a child, complying with my every request. Nestled in his arms, I felt incredibly happy and secure. We talked about many things, including our childhood memories. Sabrina. Victor didn't like to show his emotions. Even when he expressed his love for me, it was restrained. But at this moment, he gently pressed his forehead against mine and sighed. Do you know how jealous I was of Brent all those years? Do you know how sad I was when you married him? For those years, hearing that you were not doing well, I wanted to come back and take you away so many times. But I always lacked a bit of courage. I regret it, Sabrina, if I had come back to find you earlier. I lifted my face and gently kissed him. It's okay, Victor, at least now, we are together. You're right, at least now, I'm with Sabrina. When Victor kissed me, his movements were very gentle. It seemed he was afraid that if he applied a little more pressure, he would hurt me. I asked him to turn off the lights. Some secrets can only be quietly told in the dark. Victor. I want you. Sabrina? At least before I leave this world, let me have no regrets, okay? After saying this, for the first time, I saw such a youthful expression on the usually mature and steady Victor's face. He seemed to turn into a passionate young man. He looked at me in disbelief and confusion. Sabrina. I couldn't help but laugh and lifted my hand to hook around his neck. Victor, I am your wife now. There are many people in this world who can easily fall in love with someone and easily have a relationship, then discard it like an old shoe. But there are also people in this world who are pure and never indulge in casual relationships. Victor said that when he was very young, he silently fell in love with a flower. He watched that flower bloom for others, wither, cry, and laugh. His emotions changed with the flower. He once thought that as long as the flower bloomed brilliantly, it didn't matter what happened to him. But later, when the flower was about to die and wither, he finally couldn't hold back and returned to her side, transplanting her to his own side. From then on, for the long rest of his life, he would meticulously care for her. We were married for 5 years. Later, when I became very ill, the doctor said that both sides of my breasts needed to be removed. That way, I might live another 2 years. I didn't agree. I didn't want to die in front of Victor, so incomplete and ugly. I didn't want Victor to be sad. There are too many separations by life and death in this world. I have experienced it many times, I know how painful it is. The day I left B City, it snowed heavily. The feeling of leaving Victor was completely different from when I left Brent. The pain was unbearable, I was really reluctant, it was like someone had taken my heart away, and I felt completely empty. A few days ago, Dave called me. He said Brent was in a terrible state. A few years ago, when I got married, he and Larsen had completely broken up. But 2 years ago, Larsen came back with a 3-year-old child to find him. She directly threw a paternity test to the Winder family, saying that the child was Brent's. The Winder family didn't believe it and did another paternity test. It was indeed Brent's child. Because of their grandson, Brent's parents eventually compromised. But Brent refused. He only acknowledged the child, not willing to marry Larsen. Larsen naturally couldn't swallow this, so they fought chaotically for 2 years. Until recently, Larsen completely broke down, revealing everything that happened back then, and then left again. It turned out that everything Brent hated me for was all fabricated and schemed by Larsen. I had never sent Larsen any so-called intimate photos to provoke her. Larsen's suicide attempts were all her own design, just to make Brent return to her. From beginning to end, I, Sabrina Smith, was the most innocent person. Dave said Brent almost went mad at that time. Later, he became more and more off. He stopped going to the company and didn't care about the child. He stayed up day and night with a dog named Molly, muttering that he was waiting for me to come back. Dave tried to ask me if I wanted to go back and persuade Brent. Dave, I'm about to die, I can't take care of others. But you can tell Brent something for me. What? Sabrina Smith died at the age of 26 in front of her mother's grave. The Sabrina who lived afterward belonged to Victor, her heart also belonged to Victor. Tell him to forget Sabrina, forget the past, and look forward. After a long while, Dave asked me, Sabrina, will you forgive Brent, will you go back to him? Sorry, my father, before he died, didn't want me to be with Brent again. Dave hung up and never called again. But a month later, I received an obituary on my phone. Brent took his own life. He slit his wrists. The day he died was the same day I married him years ago. I didn't go back to attend Brent's funeral. But in my heart, I completely let go of the past. It's probably not forgiveness, just letting go. During the new year, I quietly went back to see my parents late at night. I stayed in front of their graves for a long time until finally, the pain was so intense that I almost lost consciousness. In a daze, it felt like someone picked me up. Sabrina, let's go home. It was as if I had returned to my childhood. The first time I met Victor, he stood tall like a slender poplar. Wearing a blue and white school uniform, carrying a backpack, he was quiet and steady. I was still a lively little girl, running around like a gust of wind. His parents smiled and asked him to call me Sabrina. Are you Victor? I curiously looked at him, thinking he was very handsome. Yes. He nodded at me reservedly. I immediately opened my dirty little hands and handed him a candy. Victor, have a candy. Victor hesitated for a moment but still took the candy that was about to melt. Victor, let's go out and play. My sticky little hand grabbed his. He didn't shake off my hand. We ran hand in hand to the riverside. Some kids were playing house. Someone was pretending to be the bride, and I was immediately envious. Victor, I want to be the bride too. Will you be the groom? Okay. We clumsily imitated the kids' wedding ceremony. Victor, will you buy me a wedding dress when we grow up? I will. A very beautiful one, with a long, long white veil. Okay. Victor, you're so good to me. When I grow up, I want to marry you. Sabrina. Little Victor patted my hair. He looked very cute and handsome when he smiled. Don't break your promise. I nestled in Victor's arms, using the last bit of strength to speak to him. Victor, Sabrina kept her promise. Hot tears fell on my face. Victor bowed his head and gently pressed his face against mine. Sabrina, don't talk anymore, I am taking you home. In the next life, I still want to marry you, be your bride. Victor, in the next life, come earlier to marry me, okay? Sabrina. Victor, hold me tighter, I'm cold, so cold. He hurriedly took off his coat, wrapped me tightly, and covered my hands, rubbing them constantly. Sabrina, hold on a little longer, we're going to the hospital. Take me home, I don't want to go to the hospital. Okay. Victor, carry me home like when we were kids, okay? Victor finally couldn't hold back his tears. He squatted down, letting me lie on his back. He was going to carry me home. Sabrina, hold on tight. Victor stood up, and I rested on his broad back. The last tear slowly soaked into his clothes. But the road home was too long. Victor, in the next life, come to find me earlier, okay? In the next life, let's start loving each other from the moment we meet.